If you've ever been the family scapegoat, if you've ever sat at a table where everyone laughed at you, stay with me. Because what happened 3 weeks after this moment rewrote my entire family history. Let's see if you're even mine. My father didn't whisper it. He didn't say it privately. He slid a DNA test kit across the Thanksgiving table like he was passing the salt. It scraped past the cranberry sauce, knocked against the gravy boat, stopped against my plate. 25 relatives watched. Some laughed immediately. My brother high-fived him. My mother stared into her wine glass like it contained the answer to a question she'd been avoiding for 30 years. I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I picked up the box, looked my father in the eye, and said one word. Okay. My name is Carolyn Mitchell. I'm 28 years old. I work as a pediatric ICU nurse just outside Richmond, Virginia. And this is the story of how my father's cruelest joke accidentally exposed the only lie that mattered. But before I tell you what the DNA test proved, you need to understand what those 20 years felt like, because that box didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the final move in a game my father had been playing since I was 8 years old. The Mitchell table, Thanksgiving at the Mitchell house, was not a holiday, it was a performance. My father hosted every year at the 4,000 square foot colonial he built himself on Briarwood Lane. He loved telling people that. Built it with my own hands. He'd say, like the house itself owed him loyalty. The dining table was a 10-foot slab of reclaimed oak. 12 chairs. One of them had initials carved into the backrest. G. M. Garrett Mitchell. My brother. The heir. The golden boy. That chair was carved when he was 6. Dad called it a family tradition. I called it a coronation. Garrett sat at Dad's right. I sat near the kitchen, closest to the serving platters, because someone had to refill them. If you looked at the Mitchell family gathered around that table, you'd notice something. Blonde, all of them. Sandy blonde, honey blonde, platinum blonde, and then there was me. Auburn hair, dark in some lights, red in others. I didn't match the family photos, and my father made sure everyone knew it. 20 years and 60 seconds. When I was 8, I made him a Father's Day card, construction paper, glitter glue, crooked handwriting. To the best dad in the world. He tore it in half. I'm not your dad, he said, then went back to his eggs. When I was 14, Garrett got private school. I got public. When I asked why, Dad said it at Sunday dinner. Why invest in something that might not even be mine? Nobody corrected him. When I graduated high school, valedictorian, 4.3 GPA, he skipped it. He was hosting a barbecue for Garrett, who had barely passed. When I was halfway through nursing school, Dad cut my tuition. I've been paying for someone else's kid long enough. I took out $47,000 in loans. He never asked if I finished. I did. Of course I did. My mother's silence. My mother, Jolene, wasn't cruel. That would have been easier. Cruelty at least acknowledges you exist. She specialized in something quieter. Silence. Once, when I was 19, I found out she'd been sending me $200 a month through Venmo labeled groceries. Dad found out, threatened divorce. She stopped. When I was 16, I asked her directly, Mom, am I Dad's daughter? She dried a plate, didn't look at me. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. That sentence lived inside me for 12 years. I thought it meant she was warning me about myself. I didn't realize she was warning me about someone else. The golden boy Garrett didn't invent the system. He benefited from it. At 16, he got a brand new Chief 150. I got a bus pass. Dad paid for his college in full. When Garrett graduated, Dad handed him a corner office at Mitchell & Sons Construction. No interview, no resume. Bloodline. Or what Dad believed was bloodline. Last year, Garrett bought a 3,200 square foot house. Dad wrote an $80,000 check for the down payment. I live in a 450 square foot studio. My kitchen counter doubles as my desk. My table fits one chair, but it's mine. 8:17 p.m. The turkey had been carved, wine flowing, Garrett telling some story about a job site, Dad laughing loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Then Dad stood, tapped his knife against his glass. I got a little gift for Callie this year. He pulled the DNA kit from under his chair, held it up like a trophy. Let's see if you're even mine. Laughter. Real laughter. The kind that fills a room. Uncle Dennis smirked. Aunt Brenda stared at her napkin. Garrett slapped the table. Savage, Dad. My mother went pale. I picked up the box. The room shifted. They expected tears, drama, maybe a slammed door. I gave them one word. Okay. Then I finished my dinner, the break room at 2:47 a.m. That night, I ordered a real paternity test, not the ancestry kit, an AABB accredited lab, chain of custody, legally admissible. If we were going to play this game, we were playing for keeps. The next morning, the Mitchell family group chat exploded. Dad posted a photo of me holding the DNA kit. Caption, "Let's see if the mailman left more than letters." 42 people in that group. 3 laughing emojis from Garrett, a grimacing face from a cousin, silence from everyone else. I screenshotted every message, every emoji, every silence. I was in the pediatric ICU when I read it. A 3-year-old had just survived a code, and I was sitting under fluorescent lights reading my own family reduce me to a punchline. Dana, my coworker, looked at me and said, "Get the facts, Callie, then let the facts talk." 3 weeks before, "Christmas," Dad called. "Christmas is for family. You know where you stand." 16 seconds. Garrett texted, "No hard feelings. Dad's house. Dad's rules." Mom texted, "Please don't make this worse." So I bought a 4-foot tree, put it on my counter, 8-box mac and cheese alone. At 11:43 p.m., the email arrived. "Your DNA results are ready." I didn't open it. Not yet, because once you know the truth, there's no going back. January 6th. The email that changed everything. Dad sent an email to the entire family. Subject, estate planning update. All Mitchell assets shall pass exclusively to my biological children. Biological. He CC'd me. He wanted me to see it. He wanted it to hurt. What he didn't realize was that the lab already had my results, and biological cuts both ways. January 9th, the moment everything clicked. I opened the email. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Richard Mitchell is the biological father of Caroline Mitchell. I read it 4 times. Then I understood something that made my hands stop shaking. If I was his biological child, and he'd believed for 20 years that my mother had an affair, then someone else had to be the result of that affair. And there was only one other child, Garrett. That's when I stopped being the scared daughter and started becoming the calm one, the prepared one, the one walking into the will reading with an envelope in her bag because the truth doesn't shout, it waits. And in 9 days, I was going to let it speak. January 18th, 9:47 a.m. Howard Pratt's office smelled like old carpet and authority. 2nd floor, walnut paneling, framed law degrees arranged with surgical precision, the kind of room built to make people feel small before anything even begins. I arrived 13 minutes early. Not by accident. I wanted to be seated before they walked in. The conference table was long and narrow, 12 leather chairs, a window overlooking the parking lot. I chose a seat near the middle, not at the far end like Thanksgiving, not near the door like I was waiting to escape. The middle, equal distance from everyone. My navy blazer fit like armor. The envelope sat inside my bag. Light, sealed, final. They arrived in waves. Uncle Dennis first, nods, no eye contact, Aunt Brenda behind him, already tense, then cousins, then Garrett and Stacy. Garrett looked expensive. Sport coat, polished shoes, confidence like a cologne. He didn't sit across from me. He sat at Dad's right. Of course he did. Mom entered with Dad. She looked tired. Eyes red-rimmed, mascara slightly uneven. Dad walked in last, charcoal blazer. Breitling watch catching the fluorescent light. He didn't look at me at first. He took the head seat, then finally glanced my direction. "Surprised you showed up," he said. I folded my hands on the table. I was invited. That was all. Howard Pratt entered with a leather binder, mid-60s, wire-rimmed glasses, a man who reads every clause like it might explode. This document represents the stated testamentary intentions of Richard Allen Mitchell. Dad interrupted. "Skip the preamble." Howard nodded, flipped to Article 4. All real property, business interests, and financial assets shall pass exclusively to my biological children. The word biological echoed in the room. Dad leaned back, satisfied. Garrett nodded once. Mom's fingers tightened around her bracelet. Howard continued listing assets. The Briarwood house, Mitchell & Son shares, investment accounts, life insurance, estimated value, $3.2 million. All directed to biological children. Again, that word. Biological. Dad looked at me like he'd already won. Black and white, he said. Garrett added casually, "It's just business, Cal." Just business, like childhood humiliation was a quarterly expense. Howard closed the binder. "Any questions or objections?" Silence. Dad exhaled. Victory. "I have won." My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It carried. 15 heads turned. Dad's smile froze. "Excuse me?" "Procedural objection." I stood, walked to the conference room door, opened it. Margaret Foley stepped inside, gray suit, calm eyes, leather portfolio. The air changed instantly. "Who is this?" Dad demanded. "My name is Margaret Foley," she said evenly. "I represent Carolyn Mitchell." The room tightened. "You hired a lawyer?" Garrett snapped. "For what?" Margaret placed her portfolio on the table. "Your draft will state that assets pass exclusively to biological children. My client would like to submit documentation relevant to that clause." The silence became physical. You could feel it pressing against the walls. I reached into my bag, removed the envelope, set it down in the center of the table, between the water pitcher and Howard's binder. "You asked if I was yours," I said, "at Thanksgiving. You made it public. I took the test." Margaret opened the envelope, removed the notarized pages. She read clearly. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Richard Allen Mitchell is the biological father of Caroline Rose Mitchell. No one moved. Dad stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "The laboratory is AABB accredited," Margaret replied. "Chain of custody documented, legally admissible." Garrett stood abruptly. "She faked it." Margaret didn't blink. A ABB is the standard used in U.S. courts. If Mr. Mitchell would like a retest, we encourage it. Then she added one sentence. "Of all children involved." The room detonated without sound. All. Dad looked at Garrett, really looked at him. Not pride, not assumption, calculation. Garrett saw it. "What are you implying?" he demanded. "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm presenting facts." Mom's breathing became shallow. Rick turned slowly toward her. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Her face drained. "Rick!" His voice dropped. "Who?" The word hit harder than a shout. She covered her mouth. Tears spilled instantly. It was before Caroline was born. The room inhaled sharply. "Who?" Dad repeated. "Greg Nolan." Uncle Dennis closed his eyes. Aunt Brenda whispered, "Oh my God." Greg Nolan had worked for Dad in the early 90s, framing crew, around the house, around my mother. Garrett stared at her. "What are you saying?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "The timing, I was alone. You were on the Chesapeake Project." Garrett was born October 1994. The math did itself. Dad's fist hit the table. Not rage, shock. "You let me punish her," he said. For the first time in 20 years. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Garrett the way he'd always looked at me. Suspicion. Garrett backed toward the window. No, that's not true. Dad, tell her she's lying." Dad didn't say a word. He was studying him. Hair color, jawline, years of assumption cracking in real time. "You look like Greg," Dad said quietly. Garrett flinched like he'd been struck. Mom sobbed openly now. I didn't know for sure." "But you suspected," Dad said. "And you let me tear her apart." She couldn't answer, because yes, she had. I stood. "For 20 years, you called me a mistake. You tore up my father's day card. You skipped my graduation. You cut my tuition. You humiliated me in front of everyone. And now your joke proves I was your only biological child." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't come here for money. I came because you wanted the truth read out loud. And here it is. I sat down. The room stayed frozen. Howard Pratt removed his glasses slowly. "I strongly advise postponing execution of this document." Translation: You just destroyed your own will. Relatives shifted. Whispers started. Aunt Brenda crossed the room, wrapped her arms around me. "I should have said something years ago," she whispered. Uncle Dennis looked at Dad. "Rick, what have you done?" Garrett walked out. Stacy followed. Mom was helped out by 2 cousins. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Broken. Dad sat alone at the head of the table. The Breitling watch suddenly looked too heavy. I waited until the room emptied. Then I sat across from him, not at the end, across. Did you know? He asked quietly. No, I just didn't run this time. He nodded slowly. I owe you. You owe me a public correction. In writing. To the same people who laughed. He looked at the table. I stood, collected my bag, walked out into the January cold. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one leaving humiliated. I was the one walking away whole. But that wasn't the end. 3 days later, Garrett took the test, and what he did next surprised even me. 3 days after the will reading, my phone rang. Garrett, no emojis, no jokes, no honorary Mitchell, just his name on my screen. I answered. I took the test, he said. No greeting, no defense, just facts. I sat down at my kitchen counter. What were the results? A pause, long enough to hear him swallow. 0%. Richard Mitchell is not my biological father. Probability 0.0%. There it was. 31 years of identity erased by a decimal. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything for a moment, because there's no victory in watching someone's foundation collapse. Did you know? He asked, when you brought the envelope. No, I said honestly. I only knew about me. Silence. Then something I'd never heard from Garrett Mitchell before. Crying, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and stunned. I called you honorary Mitchell your whole life, he said. I said it like it was funny. You're still my brother, I said. He didn't deserve the lie. Neither did I. We didn't choose this, I added, and for the first time ever, we were equals. 2 weeks later, Valentine's Day. Because apparently the universe has a sense of irony. I was in the hospital cafeteria. Fluorescent lights, chicken sandwich, orange juice, my phone buzzed. Email from Richard A. Mitchell to the Mitchell family distribution list, 42 members. Subject to my family. I opened it. I have spent 20 years treating my daughter Caroline as though she did not belong. I called her a mistake. I denied her opportunities I freely gave to others. I humiliated her publicly. Most recently at Thanksgiving, I was wrong. Caroline is my biological daughter. She has always been my biological daughter. The doubt I held was unfounded, and the damage I caused is something I will live with. She did not ask for money. She asked for a public correction. This is that correction. Caroline, you were never a mistake. I was Richard A. Mitchell. The cafeteria noise didn't stop. Nobody gasped, nobody clapped, but something inside me exhaled for the first time in 20 years. Dana slid into the seat across from me. You okay? I thought about it. Not the reflexive, I'm fine. The real answer, I'm free, I said. 2 weeks later, my mother showed up at my apartment. No Lexus this time. She parked down the street, stood outside my door for 5 minutes before knocking. I watched through the peephole. She looked smaller. No makeup, no bracelet. I opened the door. She stepped into my 450-square-foot studio and looked around like she'd entered a museum of consequences. The counter desk, the single chair, the little Christmas tree still up because I hadn't taken it down. You built this, she said softly. Yes. She sat on the edge of my bed, the only other place to sit. I knew, she whispered, about Garrett. From the day he was born, the timing, Rick was gone on a job. Greg Nolan was still around. She did the math and chose silence. I let him blame you, she said. I let you carry it, because if he doubted you, he wouldn't doubt Garrett. And if he didn't doubt Garrett, he wouldn't leave me. There it was. The truth. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just selfish. I used you as a shield, she said. The words didn't stab anymore. They landed softly, because I already knew. I can't forgive you today, I said calmly. Maybe not ever. But I'm not carrying your secret anymore. She nodded. She left. No hug, no dramatic goodbye, just a door closing. And for once, it wasn't me standing outside it. In March, Margaret called. Your father wants to revise the will. I leaned against my counter. New language? Yes, assets divided equally between you and Garrett. And he's filing for adult adoption. That made me smile a little. Garrett agreed. Virginia allows adult adoption. It restores legal child status, public record official. Dad was choosing him, Not by assumption, by decision. That mattered. There's also your inheritance, Margaret added, roughly $1.2 million based on valuation. I looked around my apartment, the secondhand table, the thrift store bookshelf, the dented Civic outside. I don't want it. Silence on the line. You're sure? Yes. Convert my share into an endowed scholarship for low-income nursing students in Virginia. 4-year renewable, no strings. She exhaled softly. You fought for the truth. Yes, that was enough. April, first warm Saturday in months. I hosted dinner, not at Briarwood Lane, not under carved initials, at my apartment. 6 people around a secondhand pine table, Dana arguing about cornbread. 2 ICU nurses debating ventilator settings. Mrs. Patterson from next door, and Garrett. He brought pie and something else. A used Honda Civic. He sold the Tahoe. Didn't mention it. Didn't need to. He sat quietly at the end of the table. No spotlight, no golden chair. Just a folding seat like everyone else. I don't really know who I am yet, he admitted at one point. You're still you, I said, just without the lie. That's when I realized something. He hadn't stolen anything from me. He'd inherited a story written before he could read, and now he was learning to write his own. I saw Dad once more that spring. Neutral ground, coffee shop. He looked older, smaller. The Breitling was gone. I never questioned Garrett, he said quietly. Not once. I questioned you every day. Yes, I said. That was the problem. He nodded. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. He almost smiled. I'm proud of you. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't cinematic, but it was real, and that was enough. On my refrigerator is a faded piece of construction paper, taped down the middle. To the best dad in the world. I kept it. Not for him. For the 8-year-old girl who made it, she deserved to know she survived. Family isn't blood. Family isn't a will. Family isn't carved initials on a chair. Family is who stays when the truth comes out, and when the truth finally arrived. Some people left, some people broke, and some people stepped forward. I don't sit at the far end of the table anymore. I don't refill platters. I don't wait for permission. The girl who was told she didn't belong built a life anyway. And when the DNA test proved I was his, it didn't give me a father. It gave me closure. And sometimes, that's more powerful. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the one erased, doubted, or underestimated, you are not what someone else refused to see. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the cruelest joke is the one that reveals the truth. And sometimes the truth sets you free.